Welcome back to the House Environment Committee. We are changing topics to S223, an amendment that we discussed yesterday, and then making a change to another representative's proposal of amendment. Michael O'Grady has language for us to look at.
Good morning. This is Michael O'Grady with Ledge Council. Just to refresh your recollection, provide context, yesterday Representative Page came in with a proposed amendment to amend one of the charges of the working group related to reviewing classification of lakes and whether or not that is adequately done under state law. And specifically, he wanted to include in that analysis whether threats from the leaching of chemicals such as PFAS to lakes and ponds from waste treatment facilities should be part of that review of classification of lakes. In your discussion, you focused on a couple of things. You didn't want it to be just limited to lakes because PFAS is in all waters. You didn't want it to be limited to just Class A waters because PFAS is a concern in Class B waters as well. So we had it was a short discussion, but a discussion about adding the concept to the working group's charge to assess the state's obligation under the anti-degradation rule to implement an anti-degradation policy under the Vermont Water Quality Standards. What I did is I looked at US EPA's site about PFAS. I looked at their site about the chemicals of emerging concern. And there are multiple chemicals that currently don't have water quality standards that are posing issues in surface waters. PFAS is one. Dioxane is another. Dioxane is a chlorinated compound that comes from solvents and or binding of materials, and that is causing issues mainly right now in groundwater, but it's what they call miscible in water, so it can go so it tends to persist in water. Pharmaceuticals, there's stuff that comes off your tires that's contaminating waters that is not currently regulated. So I thought if you didn't want to limit it to lakes, didn't want it to limit it to class, you probably didn't want to limit it to just PFAS as well. And so what this language does, it says as part of that review of the anti-degradation rule and the implementation policy, the working group will address how to address emerging chemicals of concern that lack water quality standards as part of the anti-degradation policy. Because if the anti-degradation policy requires the agency, the state, to prevent a water quality from degrading past its current quality, you have to look at these chemicals even if they don't have water quality standards. So that's what it does. It just addresses, and it's not specific, like you must come up with the water quality standard. It could be something like in the triennial review of the water quality standards, which I can't believe Kevin told me are coming up again very quickly. It's like time is flying. That they could, as part of the anti-degradation rule and implementation rule, have a process for identifying emerging chemicals that might be impacting the water quality of a lake, and then have a process for addressing. And so it's not just PFAS specific. It's not so specific on one chemical. It's a process that would be incorporated into anti-deg to address all emerging chemicals.
Thank you. Members have questions from Ledge Council. I guess maybe Kevin, you're here to speak to this from the agency's perspective. Maybe we'll hear from Kevin and see if we have further. Senator Morris.
Michael, as you're well aware, we had a billing process that would look at the salinity levels. increasing. Is that a chemical that would be included?
So that already has a water quality standard. So they're supposed to be managing the waters for that already. And they go out, they monitor, they identify, and that's why you already have TMDLs for chlorinated. For chlorine.
All right, thank you for the reminder.
Sheldon and committee members, thanks for having me. Like to just speak to S223 and the most recently proposed amendment as Mike went through. I have a few things I'd like to read just as part of the statement and perhaps can answer some questions more broad. The objectives of the Water Classification and Anti-Degradation Study Committee centers on barriers and solutions to adopting an anti-degradation implementation rule and advancing reclassification of lakes. In other words, how can Vermont better protect its highest quality lakes where the existing water quality now is actually better than the minimum water quality criteria of a higher class. This would be lakes, some examples would be Caspian, Maidstone, Echo, Shadow, a number of lakes in the Northeast Kingdom. And rather than sort of tacking PFAS or the contaminants of emerging concern as is now proposed in the amendment onto this study committee's scope of work, committee that only has 4 months to meet, discuss the subject matter, make decisions, and draft a report. If the legislature is really interested in learning more about PFAS and more broadly, the emerging contaminants of concern, that might be a topic to dive deeper into outside of this anti-degradation and lakes reclassification committee. Addressing contaminants of emerging concern could and probably should be a study of its own and a report unto itself. So doing so as part of this study committee would not give it the time or attention it merits and could derail the group entirely. CECs are by definition not fully understood by the scientific community or well known in terms of the extent or impacts. As Mike mentioned, it includes pharmaceuticals, microplastics, tire chemicals, PFAS, pesticides, and other chemicals. So how to address emerging chemicals of concern that lack water quality standards as part of the anti-degradation policy is an incredibly challenging question and not something that can be adequately considered as a component of a different study with a very short time frame. By taking that approach, it would provide the agency an opportunity to take testimony and the legislature and determine if and where additional information or action is needed, evaluate whether a study committee is appropriate, and if so, better define the scope of work and identify the committee members with relevant expertise to emerging contaminants. So the proposed amendment is incredibly broad. I think it's supported that it's been shifted away from just PFAS. I think it's a really important issue to look at this more broadly, but it is also very technical. And we're just concerned that putting this into this particular study committee might shift the focus away from the lakes classification and the anti-deg rule. Let's see.
Thank you for your testimony. How are you finished?
I would just want to add one more thing. I know the other piece of the amendment is related to committee membership. And I think generally we would support and suggest the committee return to the original scope and membership, including Jim Gimwea. But I know there's been some more recent additions. And if that's necessary to move forward, I think we can support that as well. But just recognizing that the larger the group gets, the more difficult it is to administer and manage, it becomes quite technical when you get into anti-DEG. So we want to make sure that people at the table and part of the committee are the right people.
Thanks for your testimony. Members have questions for Mr. Berghoff? I'm wondering, how is like chloride with a standard integrated now into anti-DEG, the anti-DEG work that you do?
All of the anytime we have a standard promulgated and included in, criteria, the water quality standards, we're basically looking at what the acute toxicity might be, or understanding sort of, where a water would be impaired and what basically would identify where there is an impairment. And, then jumping from the standards to more policy as to how do we address the impairment. And that's really what the water quality standards are about, is identifying, what the limit is, where it will impact aquatic biota, aquatic life, or human health, and then translating that into policy, permits, regulatory requirements to address. So I think chloride isn't any different. It's more challenging, I think. It's also an it's not an emerging chemical in the sense that, PFAS and pharmaceuticals and things of that nature, but it comes with the same challenges because we do use a lot of chloride in de-icing, and are currently trying to address that through the other bill that aims to establish a voluntary certification program to provide some limited liability and give applicators a reason. Otherwise there's no reason for them to apply less. So having training and the availability of the training to identify, calibration of equipment and when to apply, when not to apply, how much to apply. Those are really taking the water quality standards and translating that into something that we can use to protect our waters and restore them.
What happens if a stream is found impaired for chloride, but it's a stream? Or, what happens to its classification if it's degraded from chloride?
The classification could change. I think it would be, as we recently did, we publish a list of impaired waters, 303D list. And every 2 years, we, based on the biomonitoring data, either determine if there's new waters that need to be listed for a particular impairment or taken off. We actually, this most recent listing process, we delisted several streams at some of the ski areas, vicinity of Mount Snow, that have come back and are currently meeting their, one, in fact, meeting Class A standard. And that's the good news. But we also find that there's other streams that are stressed for, it's not a stressed list, but it's impaired for aquatic biota, but we might be doing more biomonitoring to really determine the root cause of the impairment.
I shouldn't have digressed.
Kind of going down into.
Thank you. I'm intrigued, obviously, about this topic, but what I'm hearing is the agency does not support this amendment and actually would prefer the original work group also.
That's the preference, but we don't want to see this anti-degradation rule committee derailed. If there's, a wish to maintain the membership as it's proposed in the amendment, I think we're certainly more supportive of expanding, not looking just at PFAS and looking more broadly at emerging, chemicals of emerging concern. But I think when we started with this bill, it was really about looking at reclassification and also stimulating the opportunity to put forth the anti-degradation rule has been stalled for some time.
Members have questions? All right, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So Michael, would you join us again? Now we have really a situation where we have an amendment that we proposed, this amendment that we it's on calendar. So I think we should be discussing that. And then remind me what we did with the first amendment. Did we already approve it? And yeah, so we've already added those two members.
Part of the bill.
Yeah, okay. So what are folks thinking? What's the wait, yeah.
Could I just say that I sent it to Rep Page, I sent it to Jared Carpenter, and I sent it to Chris Rice. Rep Page says it wasn't exactly what he was looking for, but he's okay with it. Jared Carpenter said it was fine with him. And Chris Rice just said thank you.
Representative Hoyt.
Just a statement. I mean, I think, look, thanks, Mike, for the work. I think, ultimately adding is, the group looks at how to address emerging chemicals and concern of black water quality standards. Here's the question, like, can they look at that and say, we can't address this yet because we don't have enough info and we need a separate study, and then move on to classification and stuff. I mean, I don't think it's the work of the group.
Working groups do that all the time. They say that they don't have the capacity or requires additional work or additional resources, and it happens.
Okay, so, but we could, we did make a promise to Representative Woody, Representative Page. And my fears of kind of mission creep for the work group are manifest here and supported. So I guess I'm curious if folks, what are folks thinking? Representative Marshall.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think I'm sensitive to what Kevin was expressing about this. Obviously, leadership within the city could maintain it and keep things on the track, but this just adds another dimension, and sensitive to that. But then I'm also feel kind of bad that Woody was asking for something specific, and we expanded it out to something even big. Even that specific thing, looking at PFAS, which is better defined than just emerging chemicals overall. That by itself would have been tough. Now with looking at all emerging chemicals, that's really tough. I feel like we derailed the whole thing by expanding the scope. I don't know that I can support it, actually. I guess it's kind of where I'm kind of just based on what Kevin said.
Representative Austin.
Yeah, I just feel like the capacity of the group, they don't have the capacity to implement.
I think the group's gonna look at that and say, we need a real study. We're gonna work on the stuff, the rest of the bill, classification and anti-degradation. It just doesn't really concern me. That's just my thought.
Chief.
I hear that we could add it because we want to do something related to a conversation we had yesterday with the members proposing an amendment in the hopes that the committee won't really take it too seriously, but I don't think that's good policy making. So I can't support that.
To put something in that you know is not.
That's sort of our intention is really for it to be ignored. Like that's if that's my intention, I can't in good faith vote for that.
And I would just bring us back to the whole reason why we're doing this is to get this anti-deg rules in place, which have been sort of problematic for such a long period of time. And if we really want to maximize the possibility of success of this group,
I think that's the path we really want to be taking, and these other issues are extremely important. But I'd rather see us get something done than something maybe not so much done, and really keep the focus on what we're trying to do.
Representative Voss.
I have a question. Do you think that the group will get kind of sidelined by the focus on PFAS and Lake methane? I know this isn't the other amendment, but just hearing this testimony, I thought you said that you were concerned that the study group might get the focus on PFAS might steer the group in not the direction we're hoping.
I think it would to address the PFAS and even something broader than that should take a lot of work, effort, and digging in because it's important. So I wouldn't want to be derailed because of that. Because it is a very complicated issue, including, some of the standards that are being developed, for example, for PFAS. Our agency doesn't have the technical capacity to promulgate that type of standard and criteria. We rely upon EPA to develop those standards, one of which they have a standard proposed for aquatic life that the department, as part of the triennial review of the Vermont Water Quality Standards this fall, will consider whether to adopt or not to adopt. And I'm not going to say one way or the other, but if we choose not to adopt, we have to have a technical reason and a basis for not adopting a new standard that was put forth by EPA. That's the triennial review is another component. That is a public process that will be initiated this fall.
Sure.
You're in the room, Warren Coleman. Did you want to say anything?
Sure. It's Warren Coleman with MMR. I testified to the committee probably months ago when we looked at this bill. As somebody with more as like a subject matter expert. I was at Agency Natural Resources for 10 years and then private sector for the last 15. And it's been an issue I've been working on. So I was at the agency back in 2000. I think the discussion you just had is I think the right one. I think setting an expectation that you're going to look at this issue and then just saying we're not really going to get to it. It's probably not a fair thing to set that kind of expectation. And I do, as somebody who may be on this working group, I know I don't have the technical expertise, and you would certainly look to the Agency of Natural Resources as the technical expert. So I agree with what Kevin suggested and what's been said by the committee. I don't know if there's another way to, and I hate to do this to my former agency, but to make sure that they take a look at the issue as part of the triennial review, whether it's a letter, a commitment from the agency to take a look at that. I just think that's going to be the right forum, not this committee. I think it's already got a pretty tall task in a short amount of time to add that onto it, or to create the expectation that we will take a look at it and say, yeah, actually, we don't have enough time. It's to be honest right up front about it.
I guess what we'll do is take a straw poll on our own amendment. Hearing those I've heard from, haven't heard from you, Representative Pritchard, yet, or Morris.
My feelings are the same.
Okay, so I'm gonna say all those in favor of withdrawing our amendment, raise your hand. All right, of the 9 members here, everyone's in favor of that, and 2 are absent. And so we will need to talk to Representative Page about this, so that can help with that.
I can do that.
You can. 902 straw poll to withdraw. And as far as the other 2 members, do they have a fiscal impact, adding the 2 members to the
Yeah, they add $2,100 to the cost of the working group, which increases it to around 17 to 19. I can't remember exactly. I can find that if you would like.
Was that 14?
I thought it was 8. I thought that was at 4.
Hold on a second.
Last one I saw was at 14.
Well, they didn't issue a new fiscal note I emailed Chris Roop and said, hey, what's this gonna cost? And he said it's gonna cost. Yeah, $2,100 or approximately 17,000 total for the bill.
No, I believe it. Worse than I thought.
But it would be absorbed in the legislature's budget and,
And if those folks don't participate, then, I mean,
right, it's only if they claim it.
Yeah.
We don't just give it to people. They have to actually fill out a form.
and Representative Austin wanted one of those on there already.
Yeah. It's just like Champlain, it's not PFAS, but it's phosphate that is killing St. Albans Bay, and it is a class 1 and class 2. There are different places on the qualify, but the question I have, and will the Menthamega group, will they be able to have a conversation about the lake and the concerns they have within this group?
Will they be able to have a conversation about this?
Well, will it focus on what's going on at Lake Menthamega with their concerns?
Not at this committee. I mean,
So
this
why?
committee is trying to work at statewide anti-degradation policy.
Right, but there's now a group from Lake Menthamega.
Yes.
They
there are.
represent, I'm just wondering, they'll be looking to set the state and not specifically wanting to focus on Lake Menthamega.
I don't really understand what you're saying. I'm sorry.
I think they will have the opportunity to raise issues as part of like lake classification or reclassification of water. So like whether or not certain uses should be prohibited going forward. I think that level, I don't doubt that they will raise the question.
But not derail that focus.
Well, that'll be up to the committee. That'll be up to the working group about how it goes forward.
Flavor.
Thank you. It's not just the NWA, FOVLAP, Federation of Vermont's Lakes and Ponds.
Right. Right.
They'd be part of the study group, I'm sure. And that covers.
I thought we only had
all
two
of-
yesterday.
Right, we only had
We did only add 2 yesterday.
That's,
They were already on there.
we're already-
we
yeah.
were already on, so that's what I'm wondering. Anyway,
Anyway, Representative Hoyt, and then we have to go back to the other amendments that we need to decide.
Just got to tell me what I say to withdraw my amendment.
You stand up and say, I asked for leave of the house, withdraw the amendment. You can say,
Do I talk about what's in the amendment at all and why I'm there? Just,
you can get up and say something like Agency of Natural Resources came in and said the whole concept discussed in Representative Page's proposed amendment and the committee's proposed amendment was too broad for this working group and could consume its task. And consequently, the committee chose not to include it. Okay. And maybe you say we're potentially communicate with the secretary about having this issue be discussed as part of triennial review.
I just say, I has to leave the house.
That's amazing. Okay, we can work that out after. Thank you, Michael and
thank you.
Kevin for joining us. we are needing to go back to our amendments and make a plan forward for the 325 amendments. Now, I'm going to say that because Ways and Means needs to look at 2 of these amendments. We need to prioritize those. So I'm going to start with the accessory on-farm business amendment, Representative Burt, which would affect the revenues of the state of Vermont. So that's why Ways and Means is involved. Folks, who wants to kick off thoughts on this amendment? Representative Chapin.
I mean, I think we've been speaking about AOFBs a couple times lately. And I'll just reiterate that I think that there's no way we can do this without having some significant impact on municipalities, on businesses, on Act 250. I think it's just, this is a really very, very substantial change that I know some municipalities really don't want this because of the impact on communities, neighbors, and the one that is most critical in my community is the impact on roads. And so I guess I'd just say this is a very impactful amendment, and I don't think we can do this right now without, we need to take up this topic next section in depth, and we'll have some more data to do that with.
Representative Tenlevy.
I'm gonna latch on to that word, impactful. I think it is impactful in a good way for farmers who are trying to stay viable. That's why I like it.
Representative Hoyt.
I'm not really against necessarily this idea, but I do think it deserves further discussion, so I wouldn't support it this time.
Yeah. Representative Sackowitz.
Yeah, and that's basically where I'm at. It does seem like a complicated issue. We don't really know what the effects will really be, and it's one of those amendments that we would love to take up, but really don't have the time in this time of this session.
Yes, Representative Labor.
Thank you, Chair. I tend to agree with Craig Burt. If we want to attract young couples from away to move to the state, we've got to offer them something more than center villages. And I come from an area where there's already several of these farm bed and breakfasts, if you will, that are combined with organic vegetable growing. And with the constant transportation and moving our food products to this state, see this as sustainability to attract young people to come here. Right now, we have an exodus of people. I'd like to see that changed. I think proper zoning and regulations of traffic and parking, etc., can be worked out. And, I can see taking a 10-acre lot, putting 5 on it and having a CSA start. I can also see importing the tannery to an abandoned state building process to sustain those people if they produce more than what they need for their own sustainability. I know Groveton, New Hampshire tried it. All I can tell you. So I'm in favor. Careful exploration and implementation.
Well, that makes me kind of wonder, we did just change the date, I think, on the deliverable for an accessory on-farm business report back from the Land Use Review Board. I think this is an incredibly nuanced and area that we've been working on for a long time in this body, and apparently folks think we still need to do work on it. And doing something that we perhaps only partially understand at this time doesn't feel like a prudent thing to do, honestly. Like it's actually unclear I mean, we're actually opening a door here that a recent legislature closed. That feels very much like, you know, we did a lot of thorough work, including on this in Act 181. So I feel like waiting for the study to come back is the right path forward. Including understanding how municipalities are going to be regulating agriculture, which is another, it's like a live conversation that's happening in the Ag Committee, probably as we speak. Just feels like there's a lot of moving parts here. Representative Chapin.
I just wanted to clarify, Representative Labor brought up some accessory on farm business things like CSAs and canneries. And I just wanted to clarify that those are already exempt from Act 250. And that this is really about those like homestays, those inns, bed and breakfasts, wedding venues and concert venues that the previous legislature determined should not. So I guess I just wanted to clarify that many business models do, many AOFBs do have that exemption already.
So are we, folks? Representative Pritchard.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the amendment. I guess my area is maybe a little different than Ellis. Yeah, we have folks in our area that are doing the best they can to diversify just so they can get by. And the more tools they have in their toolbox to do that. For years we've been, it's been a death by 1,000 cuts to these folks. And, I just feel totally different about it. We've got some young folks that have really tried to do, to diversify their business. They've gone from dairy to cheese and beef, and they're trying to make this thing work. And these people are they have the straw above the water. And, this will help them. And, I don't have the concerns in my area for this. I don't think there's the concerns there. I mean, people just want to get by, and they don't have the time to jump through all the hoops and red tape to try to make ends meet. And I think we got to start simplifying stuff. I like this amendment. I like his other amendment. I mean, this other amendment is all about what this state was 70 years ago. We're trying to get back to that. And that's a win-win for everybody. So I support it.
I just want to clarify my position, which is not that I don't support this kind of a change. I do support widening the exemptions for a certain scale of events and particularly homestays, which I don't think are that. But I think that this language is so broad that we're including some potentially very extreme examples. And I think we need to have a nuanced conversation and data and try and create a threshold in here for events and scale. So I just want to clarify that. I do wish to edit this section of statute next session.
Wishing doesn't make it happen for today.
Agreed. It felt like you said something about my position that was not accurate. So I'm just trying to clarify my position.
I guess I meant your concerns. And I'm not saying that they weren't accurate or legitimate. They're not in my neck of the woods. And I don't feel it's concerned of anything.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I haven't commented on this yet, but I'm thinking of some events that have happened around the state, a couple in my area, where no permit or permit amendments required for construction of improvements. I like the idea of the educational one, busload of kids coming up. I think that could be phenomenal. Recreational, we have bicycle races hosted on Mount Escutney, other areas, Burke. If that would be included in recreational, I have a concern there how big it could get. Social events, does that include a fish concert? Which is detrimental to the Northeast Kingdom for a while. And I'm just concerned that this is so broad that those type of events would go unregulated, wouldn't require a permit. So I like the idea. It makes it tough at this point to discuss that or to support it without having definitions on it. And we heard about the restaurant in the Woodstock area. Caused significant problems with the neighbors.
And again, I'm again open, to looking at this. I think it's really important to think about how to expand farming and farm products, but I think of the neighbors. There's no kind of regulation over, especially the social events. It's not even a regulation, it's the enforcement that becomes a nightmare. I mean, and that's what we're finding, at least around where I live. The police are called out to these places, at all at night, when they're supposed to have closed down, but they've gone on for 2 more hours. And I just would like to tighten it up a bit, in order to consider the neighbors that live on these roads and close to these events, and what are their rights.
All right, so I guess we'll do a straw poll on this now, and I am so all those in favor of the BERT accessory on-farm business amendment, raise your hand. 3, 4. All those opposed, raise your hand. 3, 6. So yeah, 6, 4 to 6, 1 absent. Right, and then the next one I'm going to suggest we take up is actually the date extension one. All right. Yes.
Yeah, the burnt amendment, no?
No, we're going to do the one that's proposing that Representative Charlton's amendment to propose to extend the dates.
Oh,
This should be yours. This folks have thoughts on this. Representative Tagliavia.
I was disappointed to see them brought back to 28, so I like Representative amendment. I understand what he was saying about how somebody's going to think about doing a project. They want to have plenty of time. So I don't see the harm in putting out to 2030.
Representative Hoyt.
like the interim exceptions?
Yeah, 3 temporary exemptions.
Okay, thanks.
Representative Sakowitz.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot in committee about what these dates ought to be, and with some controversy, we did settle on the 2028, moving it back. In the Senate, it seems like those exemptions were extended in time, largely due to sort of political rather than some practical reasons that we've already discussed today. And it really does seem like having the exemptions being tied to the standing up of the Tier 1A and Tier 1B areas is just the natural fit. And to do otherwise seems to actually invite some more confusion rather than clarity. And in addition, it does seem like adequate time for the housing developments to get underway in the way that they were envisioned from the start when these dates were first put in place some time ago. So I would like to see the committee stick with the changes that we made and keep them at where the way they are in the bill right now at 2028.
Representative Labor.
Thank you. I guess I'm in favor of moving back a little bit. I think developers have to look and look for sites, but they also have to look for money. And money is not getting cheaper. Yes, they're just renting the dollar, but the interest is not going to stay static. And if we don't give them time to lock in their funding, whatever, to get a process off the ground, that's only one facet of it. The other facet is they don't have maps. There's no boots on the ground with clarity on mapping. And I don't know if there's a definite date on when that will be available for developers to set the hydrologists into gear. Contracting with providers of the services they're going to need. And in my area, there's darn few. So if we truly have a crisis, then I think we ought to address it. So I'm in favor of it.
Senator Morris.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. I see both sides of this. If you leave the 2028 date as is, 2028, we extended another 2 years. I understand that logic. However, we've got, there are 3 projects in Springfield, town I represent, that have been working over a year now to try to get the development started or implemented. And it's probably, they're not going to start this year. So we're looking at a couple years out. So I'm sensitive to Rep. Charlton's comment that it takes time to develop these. And I understand if once it's started or in the process and they can continue, I get all that. So my second half of split on this is I don't think 2030 is outside of expectations of what some of these developers are going to do for our larger scale housing projects that we'd like to see. So it comes down to which way am I going to vote or support? But I really don't see a problem bumping it back out to 2030. I understand the logic to keep it 2028 and we can move it at a future time. It's only 2 years. And we need the development to start. And a lot of these projects are 1, 2, 3 years out before they'll start construction. Or more.
Senator Chapin.
I'm just wondering if we could clarify, we don't have ledge counsel in the room, but if either you or any of our guests could clarify and just find it inaccurately even myself. At what stage in the planning and permitting have to be at by the end of the exemption?
To apply for your permit.
Yeah, you just have to have submitted an application.
Yes.
So I guess I'm just really not really buying that projects won't
Yeah.
go there if they want to try and utilize these kinds of 250 exemptions in the next few years. And we didn't get any specific examples We didn't get anybody coming and talking to us other than Let's Build Homes to really advocate for these provisions. And we're already extending the dates another year, which gives us more time next session if we want to continue to look into this. And I just, like, I understand that people just want extensions from Act 250 kinds of development. I get that, but we also have received almost 20 letters from municipalities around the state saying we didn't want anything in Act 181, get rid of it. So we know there's municipalities out there that don't want these provisions. And I guess I don't. So I wanted to clarify that because I really think that that's illuminating. It's illuminating to me. You just need to have started the application process by January 1, 2028. I think that gives a lot of room.
Yeah. Representative White.
I agree with what Representative Chapin said. Thankful for the clarification about where the process you would be by that date. So I would not be in favor of the date back.
Representative Austin.
Yeah.
Second.
And I've said this before, it's an affordability issue. Housing is the most important thing we can do to bring down the cost for Vermonters to get workforce to move up here because our workforce is aging out. So I don't want to extend the date at all. I don't want to go to 2030. Yeah.
Representative Sacco.
Yeah, and I guess I was just gonna say, when we put those exemptions in, it was specifically because of the fact that we want to encourage housing in certain ways. And we didn't have a really good way to do it except for these exemptions because the tier 1A, 1B, provisions had not yet gone into effect, and we're still putting those into effect. And so it really was that was the whole idea. And by doing that, we're giving communities the opportunity here, building off of what Rep. Chapin just said a moment ago, we're giving communities the opportunity by having the exemptions end in 2028 to either opt in or not to what they want to see in terms of their local communities and the ways that they want to grow. And so by extending this date, we're actually telling certain communities that might be telling us, we don't want this, that we're going to make them accept these kinds of projects anyway. And it's not just between now and 2030, because as was just noted, all you have to do is have your permit process started by the end, for these to get in the door. And that could be, December 2029 for a multi-year project. We can now be looking at construction happening in some communities that have told us that they're not sure they want it for many years into the future. So I really hope we can hold to this 2028 date, which really, comes out of, a particular situation we were in before, and now it's going to be over, and then we're going to get to a different spot moving forward.
Yeah. I don't think I need to repeat. I agree with what Representative Sakowicz just said and Representative Chapin. We debated this. We talked about the reality is that some of our towns don't want any of Act 181 to happen. And if we're pausing on or repealing the tier 3 and road rule, after having heard pushback from those communities, I think it's only fair that we would also give them a chance to opt in on these housing exemptions. All right, I'm going to word this one slightly differently. All those opposed to this amendment, raise your hand. 2, 3, 5, 6.
I fully expect we're going to visit this again.
We will, I'm sure. All right, all those in favor of it. Raise your hand. 6, 4. Right.
Surprise, surprise.
Let's go to Representative Burnett's amendment. His is related to tier 1A and inserting language that town may meet requirements to be a tier 1A by showing that they have regional planning staff or other contract capacity. And just to reprise in the 1B, we have that ability for towns that are smaller to meet their obligations through contracted capacity. And that for the 1As, it's expected that they would have their own staff doing development review. Representative Austin.
This amendment didn't make any sense. Because they had option.
Representative Boyd.
I came in a little late, but I couldn't really figure out what the issue was anyhow. I mean, I thought the tier 1A areas are like the biggest municipalities in the state. I mean, Hartford has like 10,000 people and it's got like it has a substantial municipal staff doing planning and zoning. So I guess I just didn't understand what the purpose of this was. So I'm not going to support it for that reason.
Representative Taglivia.
I think this amendment is targeting smaller municipalities, considerably smaller than Representative Boyd's he's talking about, that do have water and sewer, that may be thinking about trying to grow, and then maybe they don't have, like I said earlier, the grand list to support a full-time staff at the time, but maybe once they grow, they would be able to. So this to me would be a, let's try it and see if it fits. Why I support it.
Representative Chapin.
I mean, it was curious and interesting to talk about this morning. In some ways, contracted capacity and staff is a little bit semantics to me. But I think that I'm very concerned about the RPC. I would really need to dig into that. I don't think RPCs play an incredibly important role in backing up municipalities and supporting them and providing all kinds of technical assistance, but I don't see them ever, and maybe I just don't know enough, but I don't really see how they are should be actually providing a type of staff capacity. So I would, if we were going to keep considering this, I would really want to dig into that piece. It's very different to me than the contracted capacity language. I think that if there is not a single municipality that anybody has heard of that would like this change, then I don't see why we would make it. And we had VLCT come talk with us about S325 and Act 181, and we didn't hear it from them. We had the RPCs come and talk with us about Act 181 and S325, and I think we have 3 or 4 different regional planning commission executive directors in to testify, and none of them mentioned it. And I just look, I appreciate it conceptually, but if there's not a single municipality who wants to do this, then or has this need in order to achieve the goal that they want, which would be 1A status, obviously, I see the need.
Yeah, I guess I would just add also that it kind of gets to what's the natural sort of growth in municipal capacity over time, and how does it fit in with, these kinds of requirements for getting tier 1A status. And the way I'm understanding this is that communities would have this kind of capacity in place just very naturally before they would go to apply for tier 1A status. Representative Hoyt just mentioned that his community already has these kinds of municipal capacity. I don't believe they're looking at.
We're looking at 1B. I didn't even know that.
So communities, would presumably be 1B, have this capacity as they're sort of the bigger, perhaps 1B communities. And then at some point, if they saw that they were, really wanted this sort of additional sort of part of the tier 1A process, then they would be ready to go for it, and we wouldn't have to, feels like we'd be putting the things in the wrong direction by approving this amendment.
Right. All those opposed to this amendment, please raise your hand. Great. In favor, please raise your hand. So let's talk about Herb Olson's amendment, which I'm not even sure, I guess it was sent to the clerk. Must have been. But it's unclear what it does. I mean, it deletes the smart growth principles in one place and takes them, inserts them from another back here. So, and they're identical. So, I don't know. Is anyone in favor of this amendment?
They're identical. Just swap, but it doesn't change them.
It's already called out, other section.
Very unclear. Representative Tagliavia.
Thank you. I understand, I think his concern when he started talking about his concern about smart growth principles, but when, after hearing that it's just, they're interchangeable, it's like, it's not gonna fix any of his concerns.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so all those opposed to this amendment, raise your hand. Right, that is the 10 of us present. And then back to smart growth with Bert. Amending, proposing to amend one of the smart growth principles by inserting, including homesteading, small scale agriculture and forestry and supporting housing into it. Members have thoughts? Madam North.
I guess of all of them, this one makes the most sense to me, and it's really just getting back to our Vermont heritage of our roots, no pun intended, getting back to our roots. Yeah, really emphasizing and clarifying that this small scale, the lower end of the agriculture and forestry activity is needs to be called out and encouraged.
Representative Sakowitz.
Yeah, guess I have two thoughts. One is that homesteading, small scale agriculture and forestry, I think is already included under strengthened agricultural and forest industries. They are, even though they're small, they are part of those industries in that sense. And then, but I have more concerns around supporting housing. I'm not quite sure what the effects of that are, including that here. Housing seems to be. I just not sure what that really means in this context. So I've become more concerned about that part of it.
Representative Hoyt.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what was just said. Like, I wasn't quite sure the practical effect of this because it seems like homesteading, small scale agriculture and forestry would be included already based on the language. So, I'm a little unclear on how the supporting housing might or might not do anything. So I would not be in favor of this.
So I guess I'd like to point out two things. One is that because this is a list of principles and it's not rules or sort of statutory directives, to me, this is very much a values statement. And the impact of changing the smart growth principles in this way is more, I think, is impactful in a values-based way, and calling out and reminding planners who are using these principles in their work to not forget about these things. And it's not very impactful in that I don't think it forces any kind of decision or action that could be sort of a significant unintended consequence. So So I just want to call that out and say, I think there's an opportunity for us to do something impactful in a values-based way that acknowledges certain aspects of our rural communities without being impactful in sort of a, an unintended consequences way. I'm a little less clear about the housing language than the other. And then I guess having worked in agricultural and economic development for 15 years, I will say I don't agree with the statement that homesteading is included in the terminology of agricultural and forestry industries. Industry usually means commercial activity, and homesteading is not. Is literally, I think we don't have a statutory definition, but there's plenty of definitions out there that you can look at. And generally, I think homesteading relates to non-commercial activity, and we already have thresholds in our statutes around agricultural regulatory things that are aimed at commercial activity and draw certain threshold lines that exclude some small scale agriculture. We've been discussing this with the issues around the zoning and ag bill that came in front of our committee recently. So I think that being inclusive of homesteading is a departure from the way the statement reads now and how it would likely be interpreted. And I think saying small scale is included in that is already included in the definition of any industry. So personally, I really think this is something we could do that stands for the fact that we really support rural-based food and forestry activities on the small scale, and that our farm and forestry industries do need the housing to support them, whether it's workforce or owner occupied housing. I like this amendment. I think it will be valuable to do right now.
Representative Morris.
I too find some merit in this because a lot of our conversations have come around large scale housing projects and such. And this is just a reminder that including small scale agriculture and forestry, supporting housing, I think that's what we're trying to do. So I think I can support this. I know I can support this amendment. Even though they may be included, or it may be interpreted they're included in the agricultural and forestry industries, small or big. Our conversations have been around larger scale, I think, development, multiple units. And so I would support this.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's anybody in the room who might be able to comment on what supporting housing might mean in this context.
Are you asking if either of the two folks
I
want to
am.
comment?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Well, I'm wondering if you might be able to comment on what supporting housing in this context would really mean in terms of the smart growth principles for in this agriculture section. If either one of you, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, so if you're not uncomfortable, that's fine. But just since you're here,
Like Katie Gallagher with the Vermont Natural Resources Council. Fine being put on the spot, but my honest answer is I don't know what it would mean in this context. I'm not sure if it's referring to farm worker housing or, housing for I'm not sure, I think it's vague in that way. I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think it's unclear. I think it's clear that it's unclear.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Nora.
I thought Representative Burt was pretty clear exactly what he meant. It's when you're homesteading, you have a home and you live where you do your farming. And the same is true for the small scale agriculture. Of course, you live where you're doing your activity. So it's just the housing for yourself and maybe your kids or your uncle or somebody nearby that's going to also work on the same little plot of land and do your thing right there. So that's why it's at the end of the sentence. It's modifying, including the homesteading, small areas, and supporting housing. Supporting housing goes with the homesteading and the small scale agriculture and forestry. That's exactly what Representative Burt's telling.
What,
Representative Austin.
yeah, why doesn't it say on-site housing? I mean, it's not clear what kind of housing they're talking about. I mean, I guess you could think that it's on the farm, but it's not. I just wish there was a little bit more criteria to housing that was on site or on the farm site.
I find that I support the sentiment of this for sure. I think it's important for us to support small scale agricultural and forestry enterprises. I feel like homesteading, most people who live in rural Vermont probably already feel like they're homesteading in many ways. That's what's happening. That's what kind of folks do. Even in town, we grow our own food in Vermont, many of us. The supporting housing is odd to me. We have supported housing. We've actually, required where one unit is allowed to allow multi-unit housing. We've supported ADUs construction, accessory dwelling unit construction. Those are things that are happening for everyone. So, I mean, maybe that just means it's benign and fine, but it's an annoying.
Thank you for a third time. I realize I have to ask permission to speak.
You don't do committee.
Going back to some testimony we heard from Todd Heyman, this is exactly the problem he was running into. I mean, he went through the whole process of getting permitted, Act 250 permit, and they said it covered your entire property, and he wanted to carve off a place for his aging mother to come live. And nope, you can't do that because now it's all categorized as a farm, and you can't build a house there. So that's what the supporting housing is going for. He wanted to be able to support his mother living there with him while he was doing his farming thing. Couldn't do it.
Senator Pritchard.
Yeah, I think a big part of this to me is, it's just another part of restoring trust, I think. I think this amendment, it probably addresses a lot of the folks' concerns that brought this whole thing to a head. And I'm just supportive of it. I think I'd really love to ask them, because I think it would be pretty unanimous that, they would be in support of this. I think it's a good part of restoring and making this right and regaining some of that trust. That's what I believe. I'm all for it.
Given what we've heard, I could certainly support adding in the homesteading, small scale agriculture and forestry. I still have concerns around housing because of its lack of clarity. It seems like the smart growth principles, they're not binding, they are recommendations, but they ought to be, it's relatively clear in terms of what they're actually meaning, and to change them in a way that we've heard, and which I also agree is it's not clear, just doesn't seem to be good lawmaking. But in terms of having something to look at in the future, I certainly be open to it. I just would hesitate to intentionally include something in a document that I don't really know what it means in that context.
Is that more?
No, I'm at a point where I'm going to have to take a bio break pretty quick, so.
So probably are we all, which is why we need to move on, make a decision. And did you have thoughts on this?
I wish Representative Burt was here, we could ask him, but was it, because there is maybe supporting housing is a little vague, but is it supposed to be on-site supportive housing? Or is it supporting housing next? I'm assuming it's on the same property, so. which would make it on site. I think that somebody else had mentioned that.
I just realized also he added the last word industries, which I think is kind of odd.
That's in there.
About,
Minimizes
Yeah.
conflicts of development with these
oh,
entities.
well, he left it in there. And I think it's, since industry level scale was kind of his concern, last word, maybe should say activities rather than industries. Representative.
I just, if you guys are looking at the smart growth principles, they're on page 21 of the bill as we passed it out of our committee. You know, a lot of the language is very vague and general. And so I just would try and encourage us to stay, like, keep reminding ourselves, these are principles related to planning, not related to Act 250. And they say things like balance growth with availability of economic and efficient public utilities and services, you know, reflects a settlement pattern that at full build out is not characterized by certain things. Yeah, I mean, it's just very general language, and I think we should pass the amendment as it's offered.
Okay. With that, all those in favor of this amendment as offered, raise your hand. 2, 3, 5, 6. Those opposed, raise your hand. 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, supporting that. All right, I think that's the amendments that we know of for now. With that, we will adjourn. We're on the floor. Our bill will be up quickly, I think. Well, Mike's will be.
I will be out. And we'll explain it and why I'm withdrawing it.
Quite quickly. All right, thanks, everyone.
Take the leave of that.
Adjourned for the morning.
But don't go